We're at that time of year again where everyone starts telling themselves or posting on social media that this next year is going to be their year. And this is the year that all the big things are finally going to happen. People plan big changes ranging from improving their finances to losing weight to moving to a new city and more. In general, the idea is to finally do that thing that they've been putting off or make a series of decisions that will finally change everything. But according to research, only 9% of people complete their New Year's resolutions, 23% quit the first week, and 43% quit by the end of the month. So even with all the self-improvement resources out there and the positive incentives to complete their goal, the vast majority of people never get there. And I think a large part of this has to do with not setting up a methodical plan that is tailored to their strengths and weaknesses. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to go about designing a self-improvement plan for the next 12 months that puts you in the best position to succeed according to your strengths and weaknesses. And the first thing we need to do is gain clarity on what it is we are aiming for exactly. And this doesn't mean just the cliche advice of writing your goals down on a piece of paper and then hoping you magically hit those goals. Instead, I like to go through an extensive assessment in my head of all the areas that can be improved in a man's life and systematically break down what I need to improve mixed with what I would like to improve. And you can do this by asking yourself a lot of questions. So for example, ask yourself, what are your finances like and how much money are you making versus what you would like to be making? Where's your fitness currently at? And are you just coasting despite needing to lose weight or gain some muscle? What does your dating life look like? Are you actually dating the women that you would like to date or as frequently as you would like to? What level is your physical attractiveness at? Are you maximizing all the things that are in your control to ensure your presentation is as good as it could be? How is your fashion and your style? Do you genuinely know how to dress well for any occasion, or are you just assuming that you'd be fine in that area or that it's just not a big deal? Where's your mindset at? Are you depressed? Do you have poor emotional control? Could you be calmer? Do you get distracted easily? How's your social life? Do you even have a social life? Should you move somewhere else this year? Do you have any hobbies? How are your time management skills in your systems? Do you have any systems set up to be as productive as possible while also still giving yourself breaks to enjoy life? And this is not an exhaustive list, but you get the idea. The main categories I suggest analyzing as a man are your finances, your fitness, your looks, your fashion, your mindset and spirituality, your social and dating life, your hobbies, and your travel and exploration. This period of introspection is important to gain clarity on what it is you need to improve, but you can only be introspective if you are brutally honest with yourself across the board. You cannot lie to yourself and ignore your inner voice that tells you that a certain area simply isn't up to par or isn't where you'd like to be. Sit down and list out all the relevant categories and go through asking yourself as many truthful questions about each one, and also assess the level of effort you have been putting into those areas already. From there, you can assess what areas are in more need of improvement than others, and that's what will help create a priority ranking. It's important to be able to rank what is in need of the biggest improvements, because one of the biggest mistakes that people make with goals is trying to accomplish too many at once, or getting shiny object syndrome and bouncing around between their goals based on what is currently interesting and then never accomplishing any of them because they don't stick to the plan long enough to see results. Instead, a more methodical way of going about this is determining what is lacking the most, or what is the most urgent, or what will give you the biggest return on investment right now in terms of changing your life the most. If you're watching self-improvement content, you likely have one or two areas that are glaring weaknesses compared to your other categories, and those are the areas that need the most amount of work. There will be one or two areas that are far more painful than the rest, but you may also be at a point in your life where you're in need of a total life reset from top to bottom, so maybe things are not where you want them to be. And even if you're in that reset mode, I suggest assessing what 1 to 2 categories would give you the biggest return on your investment and have the biggest life-changing effects if you improve them to a level that you were satisfied with this year. The reason for this is that it's much easier to really hone in on 1 to 2 areas and go hard at bringing those up rather than trying to bring up 10 areas at once. There's things you can do daily to bring those other areas up, of course, because we are capable of multitasking on a macro scale, but you can accomplish big things in less time than you imagine just by funneling the majority of your energy and focus into 1 to 2 high leverage areas that will have a massive effect on changing your life. So for example, let's say you're a guy that's making $50,000 a year and you live in an average suburb. Your dating life isn't where you want it to be, but your body's decently fit. Your style could use some improvement, and your mindset isn't bad, but you do feel depressed at times and lonely, like you want more out of life in your social circle. And your time management could use some work because you often find yourself doom scrolling social media and procrastinating on goals outside of work. Now, looking at a guy with this situation, there's a lot of ways we could go with this depending on the details of each category, which is where you'll have to work things out for yourself. But as a general overview and plan of attack, if this guy can boost his income closer to that $100,000 a year mark, it's going to give him more freedom to travel and potentially move to an area that has a better social and dating life. More money will also allow him to possibly invest in educational resources or coaching to help improve his dating and social life, and it will also provide him more money to improve his fashion. But in order to make an improvement to his finances like that, he will more than likely need to improve his time management skills and improve his systems and processes so that he is set up for success. Again, this is a general quick overview, and it would take a more in-depth assessment and question process to really understand this hypothetical person and what would help them the most. But when looking at the cliff notes, increasing his income will have one of the biggest returns on investment for him by giving him access to more resources, places, and people. But in the meantime, he can also develop a plan to position himself better to meet more women or potential friends while he works on those income goals, so that he isn't going crazy isolating himself or wasting time, that he could be developing social skills, which will also potentially help his loneliness and mindset. But in order to get to that higher income goal, he will need to improve his time management skills to reduce his procrastination and improve his productivity. So there's multiple areas that he can work on throughout the year, but the main 1 to 2 areas he would want to focus on would be his finances and his social life. Having those 2 areas be his primary focus will naturally incorporate bringing up some of those other areas like his productivity and his mindset, and it will alleviate the most amount of pain points. Another reason that I like to hone in on 1 to 2 things is that it makes it feel much more approachable and less overwhelming. We could continue listing out categories that our example guy would probably need to improve and work on, and I recommend doing that for clarity, but what's going to happen is that we're going to have a list of a ton of things that we'd like to improve, but not all of them will give us the biggest return on our time investment in this current phase of life. And we only have so much energy and focus to give every day. So by figuring out what will make the biggest change to your quality of life in the next 12 months, you can more effectively designate a goal that will not only get you results, but narrow your focus to a point that feels much more attainable. Now, once you have assessed all of these areas and you've identified the areas that need the most attention and will give you the biggest return on investment, you need to actually set a specific goal in a specific time frame and then potentially amplify that goal beyond where you'd actually like to be. For example, going back to finances, let's say you're making $3,000 a month and you want to improve your income to $5,000 a month, or maybe you have a fitness goal and you'd like to lose 15 pounds. Whatever the goal may be, for some people it can be good to set a goal that's even higher than where you're trying to get to. The idea is that by amplifying your goal beyond your initial target, you will put in even more effort to get there than if you set a goal that is lower. For instance, if you're making $3,000 a month and you set your goal to $5,000 a month, you'll probably do just enough to get by to eventually get there. But if you set your goal to $10,000 a month, you're more likely to go above and beyond due to the larger magnitude of the goal and the time that it will take to get there. This is also when you start to reach goals you didn't think were actually possible. As long as your systems and processes are set up for success and consistent hard work, you'll often outperform where you initially thought you'd be just by the sake of aiming higher. Now, where this can backfire is when people set goals that are too unrealistic for their situation. There's a delicate balance between ambition and reality, and this can be a difficult point to get across sometimes without sounding like you're leaning too far toward delusion or too far toward accepting mediocrity. But it's important to understand that positive delusion can help drive you to new heights, but being grounded in reality in terms of what it will require of you in your situation is also important, but only if you're 100% honest with yourself and not rationalizing or excusing yourself for not putting in your full effort. For instance, going back to the income example, going from $3,000 a month to $10,000 a month in a year is doable with the right moves. Doing something like starting a business on the side or freelancing with certain skills can absolutely boost income quickly in some cases, but aiming to go from $3,000 a month to $100,000 a month in the next 12 months probably isn't realistic unless you really strike gold with some opportunity that boosts your status and notoriety. So using our examples, there's this middle ground that is more ambitious than the original goal of $5K a month, but more attainable than $100,000 a month. You want to set a goal that gives you a bit of anxiety, like, man, can I actually hit this goal? This is going to really take some work and some effort out of me. but you don't want it so far out of reach that you never hit any goals, because that can be very discouraging in itself. You'll have to determine where that balance is for you, and this takes a huge amount of honesty combined with making yourself a little uncomfortable with a bigger goal than you originally thought of. I personally like to double or triple my goal to give myself a little bit of positive anxiety that pushes me to go harder and stay the course. A bigger goal tends to motivate and push you when you're in those moments where you're feeling low on motivation. Another way to do this to make it more approachable is by setting incremental goals that amount to larger ones. So for instance, let's say your initial goal was to lose 20 pounds, but you amplify it and aim to lose 40 pounds this year. You could set a goal to lose 10 pounds every quarter this year, which will likely feel more attainable than thinking about the big goal of losing 40 for the year. The key here is to find that point where you could realistically hit the goal if you were operating at your highest levels of effort and focus, which will keep you motivated, but the goal is also high enough to where it's going to demand you to make some changes that you've never made before in order to get there. A goal that will demand you to become a new version of yourself in order to experience it. Now, once you've assessed everything and you've established where you're trying to end up, the last step before implementing everything is setting yourself up for success by designing a plan that is tailored to your strengths and weaknesses. For instance, one of the areas I wanted to bring up last year was my productivity and output, and one of the simplest changes I made was leaving my phone in another room when it's time for deep work. Just by leaving my phone in another room more often, my productivity shot up drastically, and I was setting myself up for success by creating an environment that would be conducive to me focusing on the work I needed to do. Another thing I did was start going to bed earlier and waking up earlier than I normally do. The silence of the early morning hours is perfect for deep work because most people are asleep and distracting things like texting and phone calls aren't going on yet. But the purpose of getting up earlier wasn't just because business and productivity books say that successful people wake up early. It's because that time of day personally fit my own life and schedule in a way that would generate a higher return on investment for me. For someone else, it might be the opposite. Your schedule might be completely different to where staying up an extra hour or two late at night would be most beneficial for your productivity. Or maybe the phone isn't a distraction for you, but your environment is. So getting out of your house or away from your roommates and going to work in a library or coffee shop would help you get the quiet time you need to make progress. Another change I made this past year was switching gyms. I've been in the gym forever, so I get bored of certain places after a while, and that happened again. So I switched gyms and it gave me a nice refreshing mental boost for the last 6 months. Setting up a successful self-improvement plan is about a lot of these little in-between things that add up to making a big difference. You have to figure out what type of schedule works best with your energy levels, what makes doing the task even easier, what mentally motivates you, and if certain things are draining your energy or making the task harder than it needs to be. As a simple example, if you have a goal of starting to create content, you're more likely to be successful if your camera and lights are set up ready to go anytime you want to film, rather than having to get out all the equipment and set it up each time. With fitness, having a routine set up for the next 12 weeks and knowing exactly what you're going to do every time you step in the gym will not only get you more results if the program is set up correctly, but it will also motivate you to work out more because you won't be stuck in this loop of, well, what do I do when I get to the gym? What do I even want to do? Reducing the layers of resistance by having a methodical plan mapped out ahead of time that suits your individual lifestyle, energy levels, and what makes you tick internally is crucial to all of this. And this is why most people never achieve what they set out to do. Many people will say it's a lack of effort or consistency, which could be true in a lot of cases for sure, but many people lack in terms of understanding clarity and priorities, proper goal setting, and designing a lifestyle that sets them up for success before they even ever get to the point where effort and consistency becomes a factor. Many people lose the battle before they even get to the battlefield, but by taking the time to go through a methodical, honest process, you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls that the average person doesn't. Anyway, check the links in the description to book a call or see some of the things I have to offer, and make sure you watch this video next, and I will see you in the next one.